Hello, everyone. My name is Maurice Altaf. I'm a productivity tool specialist with SolidCAD. What that means is that I like to understand and assess your design workflow in Revit and help you improve it with CTC's productivity tools. I also have with us Sean Zerbis, who is a technical evangelist with CTC software. So SolidCAD is a platinum reseller of Autodesk products. And besides the Autodesk offerings, we partner with companies to provide you tools to better your workflow. SolidCAD can train on all of the products we sell. We also offer scan to BIM services, consultation of your BIM services, BIM needs, and various different events that we host within different regions. We also have representation all over Canada with 12 training facilities authorized by Autodesk and CanBIM. Complimentary Solid Assist technical support is free of cost for all of our clients. And we partner with various different associations such as CanBIM, Toronto BIM Community, and sponsor events that bring together like-minded professionals. Today, we're going to take a look and dive deep into CTC software, specifically one suite called BIM Data Suite. Sean, I'll have you introduce BIM Data Suite.
Thank you very much, Mohiz. Well, on the BIM Data Suite, really its purpose is to make you as a BIM manager much more informed about your projects, how they're performing, and what's going into them. We do this by making it super simple, once it's all set up, to extract project data out to a Microsoft SQL Server, or if you want, alternatively, you could use a JSON or XML file, which really allows your team to create just a ton of different reports. And you can then integrate that Revit data into reports and into other systems. Once your team has extracted this information, either live on project work or manually by digging deep into the projects themselves, you can leverage like different template visuals like Power BI, Tableau, or other things, create your templates of how you want to view the data, generate your own reports, of course, that can identify different areas in which you have interest in your models. And basically in this presentation today, I'm going to go through and discuss and kind of show you some of the functionality of the BIM Data Suite. So I'm going to kind of cover four major things. I'm going to talk about the tools so you have an idea how they work. I want to discuss data acquisition, how it gets the information, and then I'm going to show you some of the popular reports that people like to use. And finally, at the end, I'm going to show you how you can get your hands on the suite. An important note, if you have questions about this suite while we're talking about things here, I encourage you to just jump over to the questions window in GoToWebinar and ask your question there. And we'll try to answer your questions in line while we're going through the information in the demo today. So don't be shy, throw questions out there live. And in fact, what I'm going to do now is jump into a live demo directly inside of Revit. Now, what I'm going to do first is just open up a project. This actually is going to demonstrate in the first place exactly how one of the tools works. The first tool I'm going to talk about is called the Project Activity Logger, or you'll hear me use the term PAL, P-A-L for short. The Project Activity Logger is one part of the data suite. It's an invisible part, really, to the end users. It installs on their computers, on their Revit, inside their different Revit versions, and it just watches while they're working and tracks some information, like how fast does a project open? When they were opening, did they open with an audit or not? In this case, I didn't. I just opened from a shortcut on the main page. It tracks when they do things like syncing to central. So when I do a save of my project, a sync to central, it tracks some of the options that I chose there and how fast that sync was, or how slow it was potentially. It's getting all this information. It's also watching while I'm accessing different views. So if I open up the O1 code plan here, it watches how long that took. It tracks how long I spend here and how many items I edit while I'm here. So I can track how productive potentially people are in different views and how useful the views in my projects are. I can marry that data up with other aspects of the data suite, but this tool here, really for the end users, all of the end users in your company, when you're tracking the performance, the activity that's happening on your projects, this tool is just logging in the background and it's communicating off to one of the parts of the data suite, which is the SQL Server database. The other major part that's in Revit of this suite, you'll find up on the CTC software tab. If installed, it's called CTC BIM Data Suite for the ribbon, and there's one tool on there called the Project Snapshot Exporter. This particular tool is one that I probably wouldn't install everywhere. It's probably in the same instances on people's computers where they have the BIM Manager suite. The BIM managers are typically the users of this particular tool. What it lets you do is capture the data, all of the data, or as much as you'd like, that's inside of the model. See, the project activity logger, that invisible tool that sits in the background and just logs, is logging the performance about the model, how fast it's responding, and how many items total have been edited in a session, and potentially what views people were in. But it's not logging like this particular wall right here has a certain name and has certain parameters and values, and this wall moved from a known location to another location. It's not tracking that. It's just tracking, if when there's an edit made, if I move this wall, if I edit this right now and was to move that over and then sync to central, it would track that I made a change in this view, and when I sync, it would log that against the fact that I had done that. But if I want to know more about everything that's in my project, maybe I want to compare my active project to my template, well, for that, I need more data. And so this Project Snapshot Exporter tool allows me to customize exactly what I'm going after. Categories of objects, what types of data, right on down to explicit parameters and their values. So this lets me dig really deep into the project and get everything that I want, every link, every dimension segment, every dimension override, every piece of text and its value if I want, I can get all of it. And I can tell it to go out to known locations, like in this case, kicking it out to SQL Server. And I'm telling it to go to that server, and it'll log all of the information that I told it about to that SQL environment. Or if I wanted to, as I mentioned before, I could kick it out to an XML file or to a JSON file. Or if you're using from our BIM project suite, the model compare tool, which is someplace, or there it is, model compare on the project suite. This can also kick out a model compare file. So I can get deep dive information in my project stored in SQL, and a model compare file and a JSON and an XML in one step if I really want to. It's up to you how you use this. Another key aspect of this, because this here is me calling this tool up on demand. I can save all of these settings, and then I can jump in and I can schedule this. So if I wanted to, I could say every Friday at 6 p.m., take this collection of my Revit projects and create snapshots of them. So when I come in Monday morning, I have snapshots I can investigate if I need to. And that gives me regular intervals of information. And that's meaningful because then I can run comparisons and say, well, last week the project had blah, and this week the project has the new blah stuff, whatever it is, and I can actually run reports on that. Or if in the middle of the week something crazy happens, I can run a snapshot at that point in time and compare that to Friday's snapshot and see exactly what's changed in the model, so that I can understand really what's going on. This gives you the insights, again, that you can't normally get easily without manually digging through a lot of information in the project. Now, what I want to do today, let me just test and make sure this thing has a connection. It should. Yep, it's all happy. I'm actually going to tell this thing to start taking a snapshot right now. And what I'm going to do is tangent away from the Revit environment, because this tool here does the deep dive of data into the project. The project activity information is capturing performance about the project, but really, this isn't a great way of looking at it. You just know that it's happening is one thing, but let's actually take a look at a report. So I'm going to open up one report here that looks at the project activity about my models. In fact, I'm going to refresh this right now and see if this will give me the latest data from today's open, and sync to central that I did on the phone or on the line just now. This is going to give me an update here. If I look here on this first page, this enterprise page, I'm seeing sort of an administrative overview of what's going on. I see my top 5 largest Revit project models. I'm seeing my projects that are nearest to approaching deadlines. I'm seeing my top number of projects by how much time has been spent in them, and my top contributors. In my case, with my tiny data set here on my projects, I am the greatest contributor to this since it's my local little testing database. I've spent 371 hours worth of time in Revit since I started tracking data. And you know, in that time, the project that I spend the most time in apparently was this 2018-08-22 project, which for me is a coded date that tells me when this project began. And so I can kind of see what time was spent and where. I can also see down here across my entire business sync to central times for every single project. And if I mouse over one of these guys and take a look, I can see, for example, I think this guy here, one of these will have some time. There we go. There was a sync to central duration of 16 seconds on one of those projects, right? I can tell you exactly what date and time that was and what the user was. And the same thing holds true for my open durations. I can see how long projects took to open in my company. Now, if I really wanted to get sort of a more finite view of this, a more detailed view, I can go to my project summaries and I can start isolating specific project models inside of here. And when I'm doing that, I can see who's the contributors to those particular projects. I can see what their upcoming deadlines are and information like that, who's contributing, how much time they've spent, how many items they've edited, what models have the most activity and time logged. I can also see summaries of these models, understanding things like, for this particular project and this particular model, how many work sets I have, how many families, how many of those families are unplaced rooms, unenclosed rooms, all kinds of information that can help me troubleshoot without needing to open the model manually, troubleshoot some quick information. Over here, I can start seeing warnings by description. I could organize them by level. I can see in this case that I've got like walls and room separation lines overlapping. I have 5 different instances of those particular issues, right? I have walls overlapping, that's a problem. And so I can understand what some of my major warnings might be and if I have to handle anything about those. What types of linked models I have. Again, information that without me needing to do anything to directly open the models, I'm just getting. For this project and this Revit project model, I'm starting to see information like how fast this thing is syncing to central over time, how fast it's opening over time. In one case, I had somebody sitting there on the open screen. They walked away from their computer and they had a 2200 second opening time. Kind of created an anomaly for me. And I can filter that particular thing out if I want to, so I see sort of more of an average in the past year or so, right? So I can start seeing like, oh yeah, the last sync to central, which was today actually, was 1.6 seconds. And the open time today, when I was in this demonstration talking with you, was 17.1 seconds. I can see that live. I can see what the actual file size resulting from this happened to be. In this case, today, it ended up being 56 meg after syncing to central. And I can see my number of warnings here at 36. So that information is all available to me at my fingertips. I also really like this view, this model performance detail. As a BIM manager, I love using this. When somebody comes to me and says, hey, Sean, my model is performing really slowly. Well, I can click on their individual syncs to central and I can see exactly what their IP addresses happen to be. In fact, this one over here, when this particular user was syncing slowly, I noticed that the IP address was the 10.30 network, which for me, I know to be my wireless LAN, or my wireless, the WAN in my office, the wireless area network. So I would expect this user to be slower than, say, somebody who's attached to the wired network, right? When you're attached wired, it responds much faster. In fact, in my case, it was 14 times faster. So I can use this to go back to that user team and say, hey guys, you need to make sure when you're opening up these models that you're connected to the wired network, because you're 7 to 14 times faster. And if you're taking 14 minutes to open and it could take you 1 minute to open, that's 13 minutes of wasted time. And if everybody in the project's doing that, that could be a big deal, right? Or syncing to central or whatever. And so I can start to isolate these things, and I can also compare this to actual computer specifications, because it tells me what the computer name is, the IP address, the processor, how much RAM they've got, all of the information that I really care about in that computer, and what user is leveraging it. I can see what user is in there and when this sync happened and how they're connected. So all of the data that I really care about to help me make decisions is there for me. I can see warnings. I can see the views in the project and how much time a person spent in certain views and how many actions they took, meaning how many items they edited, if anything. You can see in my case, I do a lot of accessing of views and I spend a lot of time in some views while I'm talking, but I'm actually not making any changes. I'm just talking a lot and demonstrating without saving anything. And that's meaningful. Like maybe you have project managers who are spending time in projects and looking around, but maybe you've got production people and you're expecting them to make changes in views and they're not. That's meaningful. That's good to know because that means that maybe they're not being as productive as they should be. Or if I'm in a certain view, like a floor plan view, and in a certain session, a person spent like a minute or two in there and they've edited 50,000 objects in that minute, you could probably make a guess that maybe they're exploding drawings. Or if they're a BIM manager, they might be doing some other kind of processing. But if they're exploding drawings, that might be good to know if they took an action that created 50,000 objects in a view, especially a model-based view. So you can really start to derive some of this stuff in a hurry. I can see user summaries of what projects and sessions they're spending time in. I can take a look at projects themselves, understand things like Revit versions. So I can say, oh yeah, on this computer, this person was using these different Revit versions. And I can also look at Revit versions by project. This particular project had these users accessing with these different Revit versions and builds. In a lot of cases, that can help you identify whether there's going to be potential crashing up and coming. A lot of information can be used just by your end users opening and working and saving on their Revit projects, and you don't have to do anything because as they're opening and working and saving, it just gives you the information. So that's all the project activity. I'm going to minimize this and go back to Revit because while I was doing this and talking about that, I was taking a snapshot and it tells me here the data has been sent and that it was all successful. That's good to know because that snapshot that I took today on November 7th, I'm actually going to go take a look at that in my next report. My next report is going to let me take a deep dive into the actual data in the project, not just its performance, because I care about how fast it's opening and saving, but I also want to know what exactly is going on inside this model. So I'm going to refresh this, and we're going to take a look at what's going on right now today in this project that I have open on my screen. This is currently filtering for last month, about 8 days ago. I'm going to drop this down and choose today's snapshot, which is now instantly available to me at 12:39 Central Time. That's when I took that, about almost 10 minutes ago. And with this, I can now tell you that in this project, I've got 83 project parameters. And with those project parameters, 7 of them are actually invisible, meaning users can't interact with those. Now, normally, you can't identify those in Revit, but I can actually tell you exactly what they are, and I will in a minute. I can also tell you that with my warnings, there's 36 warnings in this project, and my file size right now is 55 meg. For me, that gives me a score of 6.46. So I can actually tell you the health of this project. If this number starts getting closer to 20, I start caring in a big way. In fact, I want all these numbers to be as low as possible for my scores. I can tell you exactly how many component families, the RFAs that are loaded, and exactly how many are not being used at all. 54% of the families in my project are not being used. Of those with the types, 89% of my component family types are not being used. There is a lot of room for purging in this project model. Looking at my system families, 64 unused system families, that's 42% of them. That's a big deal. I have 5 defined text types. All of them are in use. That gives me a score of 0. That's pretty cool. I only have 15 instances of text, but still, I can tell you that those individual 5 text types are being used. 2 different dimension types are in my project. They're all being used. See, I can go item by item over here and figure out exactly what's going on. Looking up here, I've got 6 links. I've got 14 different imports in my project. That I care about. I want to go look at that a little bit. But when I'm going through now, I can start getting details on this. I can tell you every single project parameter that exists and exactly which categories they're associated to. If I wanted to know exactly, let's just say things that are associated to doors, project parameters associated to doors in my project. Here we go. Here's a list of every single one of those parameters. Here's a list of if it's shared or not, if it's an instance property, and if it's visible. In this case, there are 3 invisible parameters associated to my doors. That I care about, right? In fact, I can just isolate invisible parameters, and that'll start telling me which invisible parameters exist in there and what categories they're actually associated to. So again, a real easy way to start isolating things. Looking through my work sets, I can see exactly what the work sets are, and I can isolate those and see what objects, how many elements are actually placed on there from which categories. I can take a look at the groups in my project. In my case, I have very few, but if you have a lot of groups in your models, this might be meaningful because groups sometimes can create slowdowns or potentially other errors that might be meaningful to look at. Here I can take a look at my links and imports. This is going to give me some information about them, and I can start to isolate and understand things like, are they images that are imported? Are they DWGs, an imported symbol? Are they linked models? So I can start getting information about that. Like if I want to know about the imports, I can isolate those, and I'll see that I have 4 individual defined import types here, and of those, there's 6 instances. That means something's been copied a few times. So I'm seeing some different import symbols. Actually, 2 of those are actually links, but there are DWGs that are brought in as what we call an imported symbol. 2 of those are actually imported, and that one import down here actually has 3 different instances. Well, and I can tell you exactly where they are, and now I can actually make a repair plan to go back to my project and take care of that. I can isolate every single warning. There's room and wall separation line overlaps. There's 18 instances of this with 36 different objects affected by that. Highlighted overlapping walls right here. I can tell you exactly where they are, what work set the objects are on, what they are, their element IDs. Now I can go take care of these problems. I can give reports off to my team, and they can very easily look at these things. I mean, the Revit warnings report is okay, but it's not super convenient to use. This might be much more convenient for you. I can give you reports of exact component families, system families, text types, exactly where they're in use in my project environment. Over here, I can take a look at my dimension segments. This is one that I'm really interested in personally, especially when I get architectural projects. I like to know exactly where the dimension values are, and if they've been overridden, what they've been overridden to. You know, like in this case, 9 foot 3.5 inches, somebody manually overrode that value to 8 foot 0 inches, which is completely inaccurate. It's off by 1 foot 3.5 inches. That's a big deal. And so I care about things like this because that affects, if I'm doing mechanical or structural work, that might greatly affect what I'm doing. I mean, I can see every instance of every dimension in my project if I really care to and what views they're in, but really all I usually care about is those that have been overridden so I can analyze them explicitly. So this helps me identify those things. I also like to identify exactly where lines are in use in my project. I don't actually have a lot of lines here. What I'm going to do is go find you a project that does. This is a very old iteration of one of our MEP projects. And in this particular project, I was trying to identify where some of those AutoCAD line styles were coming from. And so I found that there was an A detail line style in use and an A detail thin line style. And I happen to know who's responsible for the views in which they were drawn. So I was able to go back to that team member and say, hey, this needs to get repaired because we've got 1,800 instances of imported and exploded AutoCAD stuff in this particular project. And so we're able to get that cleaned up and repaired very easily without a whole lot of work. In fact, I've got tools that help with that, but identifying where the problem exactly was and the responsible team members, that might be meaningful. This, by the way, can even identify exactly who created it in the first place because that's information stored in the project, and who last edited an object. That's stored in the project as well, so I can start identifying that kind of information. In fact, I don't think I put that here. No, I guess I didn't. I had some views inside of here that actually identified who had generated some of the things. Yeah, here we go. Here's an example of a creator who created the actual views in the project. And so I was looking at what views existed and what their view type and view template association was. So I was getting, view template view type relationships here and figuring out who did what, where, and why. Like, why was this working systems plan based on a view template of E-systems plan? Well, that one actually maybe makes sense. But there were some that used to exist that were plumbing plans that had a wrong view template associated. And so I was able to identify who that responsible party was, right? So all kinds of things are available with this data suite that gives you just a ton of information. And this is just one example of one report that we give as a template, you can certainly take and write any reports that you find interesting across the board for anything in your company to start to identify things of your projects, elements of your projects that might be problematic. So I haven't seen any questions roll through just yet. We are going to actually open it up for questions in case you have any, but I also want to make sure that you understand exactly how you can get some more information about this suite if you want to see more about it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up the SolidCAD website here, and I've already gone to the products portion, to partner products, and to CTC software. And on that page, so SolidCAD products, partner products, CTC software, here on this page, there is a BIM Data Suite tools option. And right here, you can learn a lot more about the suite and ask more information of the SolidCAD sales team. So certainly get a hold of them if you want to know more information about the BIM Data Suite as a whole. There was a question that rolled in that says, does this work with Microsoft Power BI? And do you have to know that as well? And in fact, I didn't mention this earlier, but these reports that I was writing, these were all done in Microsoft's Power BI. So yes, it works very well with that. It also works incredibly well with Tableau or Click or whatever the actual business analytics tool is you want to use. Now, SolidCAD, I don't think that they sell Power BI or Tableau or those other tools, but certainly you can purchase them, and once the data is in SQL Server or as an XML file, you can write whatever reports you want. But you do have to understand a bit about how to use those analytical tools if you're going to write your own custom reports. And we would certainly encourage you to investigate that, because that's where the real power comes in, when you can start asking the questions that mean something to you based on the data that you're able to acquire. All right, any other questions that you guys have? Feel free to throw them in and we'll try to answer those again. If not, as always, we want to thank you for the time that you've given us. We always appreciate when you show up to presentations and interact with us. Makes it more interesting for us, and hopefully it gives you a lot of great information as well. There was another question that just rolled in a moment ago, which was, do we provide templates with for the Power BI along with all of this? And in fact, yeah. Those two reports that I was showing you earlier, this one here, that's the snapshot report, the sort of template report, and the one that is the project activity report here, this entire report for the PAL data, both of these come along with the installation so that you don't have to author all of these completely from scratch. Because that would be a little bit of a daunting task, right? Figuring out all the questions to ask. So we took these reports that are questions that many people ask and put them together for you, so you can just use them directly. And then, of course, feel free to customize. And in fact, do customize and ask us questions about, hey, how can I ask this kind of, question of the data? And we'll be more than happy to talk you through some of that and provide some advice, or maybe add some data that maybe we're not already getting. We probably are, but in case we're not, let us know, and we'd be glad to help improve the tools accordingly. Not seeing any further questions show up and roll through just yet. So once again, thank you all for the time that you've given us. We always appreciate that, and we look forward to seeing you on future SolidCAD webinars. Have a fantastic day.